Welcome to Living Fully, a podcast dedicated to enhancing your mental well-being. Each episode explores valuable insights and practical strategies to help you lead a more fulfilling life. I'm your host, Catherine Hertig. In this episode, we explore the connection between nutrition and mental well-being. Social worker Stephanie Warner dives into the role that food plays in managing mental health and shares how to cultivate healthier eating habits into your daily life. We'll give you practical tips and insights to help you balance the enjoyment of food while maintaining a healthy relationship with it. I'm here with Stephanie Warner. She is a social worker at Calgary Counseling Center. Hello, Stephanie.
Hi.
Stephanie, can you just tell us a bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you for having me. So I am a registered social worker. I've been a social worker for longer than I can count now. But I am also very interested in nutrition, which is like our topic for today. And I do have a background in holistic nutrition and eating psychology as well.
Oh, amazing.
So, yeah, I would be excited to share about that with you today.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this. I mean, food, food and eating, it plays such a big part in our lives, whether obviously just to keep us alive, but it's a part of social situations and celebrations and things like that. So yeah, let's get into it. So to start off really high level, like how does what we eat, impact our mood and overall well-being?
I think this is a great first question because it's really important to understand that what we eat absolutely impacts our overall well-being, right? Quality food, which can be difficult to get or to achieve, makes a difference in our overall mental health, right? So what we are eating, what we are putting into our body does play a role. If you've ever woken up, brain foggy or feeling really tired and you're like, gosh, I don't know why, sometimes it's about our nutrition and what our body is holding or carrying in terms of nutrients and minerals and all of these little things that we get from different food groups, right?
Does age have any impact on that? I ask because I think back to when I was younger, I could eat anything and I wouldn't notice any difference in how I felt. But now, I know if I eat too much sugar, I totally feel run down. Or, if I, have a few heavy meals, I mean, physically, but, emotionally as well. There's definitely that shift. So have you found that age plays a role?
Yes, I also think it's stage. So it's age and stage. And so if you think about, when you're really sick, for example, and you're maybe recovering from the flu, you don't necessarily eat the same thing as when you're trying to, run an endurance race.
Yes.
Right. And so the stage that we're in absolutely plays a role, but also what we eat over time impacts us, right? And you think about the different levels of digestive struggles that people have. And, so much of our body works in the gut, right? And so our ability to digest, our ability to move through experiences that all plays a role in how we process food too. And then what we eat also influences that, right? So if you are maybe noticing over time that you're struggling with different foods that you didn't before, it's a curious thing to think about it in a broader perspective. What else is happening?
Right.
Right. So for example, if I'm super stressed out and I've got, a lot of things on the go, maybe I'm somebody who's less likely to eat. Maybe I forget to eat. Right. And then I feel really tired and I'm dizzy and I'm like, oh God, I don't know why. Right? Because that has an impact over time.
Totally.
Or maybe the opposite end of the spectrum. Maybe I'm somebody who finds myself completely checked out and binge eating. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I ate an entire bag of Oreos. What happened? Right? So it does evolve and it does shift based on where we're at. Absolutely.
For sure. In your, experience and expertise, what role does, food in general or certain foods, certain nutrients how do they play a role, in mental health? I'm thinking like, some of the common reasons that people to come to see us, like anxiety and depression.
Our brain needs healthy fat to survive. When we are deprived of healthy fat, it impacts our brain. What does our brain regulate? Our mood,
right?
Our thoughts, it regulates so many things in our system. And if it is deficient, then of course we would feel more anxious, more depressed, more like we are under threat. So, there's a whole bunch of foods that are available that actually have these really important things that help us naturally regulate, right? So walnuts for the brain. If you think about, B vitamins are essential to our mood and to our overall well-being. They play a big role in regulating our emotions and helping us actually combat depression, right? So if you were to go to a doctor might say, are you taking a B vitamin complex? Right?
Okay.
Which would be a really great question. Is that something? Are you getting enough B vitamins? Where do we find B vitamins? In our leafy greens, our vegetables, our fruits.
This could probably be a whole other conversation on its own, but talking about like quote unquote healthy fats, it made me think of like the diet industry, diet culture, how there's always something that is kind of pegged as the enemy.
Yes.
And for the longest time it was fat. And it's like, you've got to eliminate that. You have to have as little as possible. And then it was carbs and sugar. And it's a tricky thing to navigate, but it's true. Like our body needs all of those things. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and if you think about, the macronutrients, so fat, carbohydrates, and protein, it's there's no morality assigned to foods, right? Like, okay, I'm gonna own it. I love gummy candy, right? I do. I love it. It's great. I don't eat it all the time, but when I do, I enjoy it. But it's not that the gummy candy is out to get me.
No,
it's not bad. I'm not a bad person because I want to eat gummy candy sometime.
Okay.
Right? So if I'm eating that all the time and that's what I'm going to, that like adds to the craving. Right? Because it becomes something consistent, reliable that we start to associate with a particular emotion, a feeling, a sensation, a coping tool. So there's no morality in food. And I think the diet industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? There always has to be something to point a finger to. I've got a quick fix. I've got this thing. Right? But when we actually start to remove entire groups of macronutrients, we are under functioning in our body in some way.
Completely. Yeah.
Right? And so carbohydrates, they are what gives our body the power to move, right? If I'm moving my hand, if I'm talking, that is fueled by carbohydrates. Fat is kind of like the vehicle for all the other nutrients in our body. It's like the way that things are delivered to different places that are in need, right? Fat supports our brain. Healthy fat supports so many things in our body. Is there a difference between healthy fats and maybe trans fats or saturated fats? Sure. But we still need healthy fats.
Yeah.
Right? And protein is essentially broken down in our bodies into amino acids. And those are the building blocks of our tissues and our muscles. Right?
Yeah, and I like what you were saying about morality. Like, it's turned around where, like there's all these emotions attached to it. Like you've heard the term of like a cheat day. Mm-hmm. So it's like there's feelings of shame or guilt if you eat a certain way or a certain thing or a certain amount.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And like let's talk about the label clean eating.
Yeah.
Right? So if I'm eating clean, the opposite is dirty. So if I'm not eating clean, I'm eating dirty.
Yeah, and there's a whole set of like feelings around that.
Right. And so it elicits all of these beliefs and all of these ways that we start to internalize our relationship with food, and it becomes very rigid. Right? So is this a good food? Is this a bad food? Am I doing good enough? Am I good enough? And that starts to show in the choices that we're making with our food. And it's fascinating because there's so much wrapped into the relationship with food, and it starts so early.
Totally. Yeah. Let's talk about that. Starting it early, like how, I mean, we could go a few places here.
Yeah.
Like,
Wherever you want to go, I'm up for it.
what do you recommend like parents do to kind of start their kids off with a healthy relationship with food?
So I think the key here is that as parents, we have to have a healthy relationship with food.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
our experience with food is undoubtedly going to rub off on our children, right? So if I am very rigid and I feel like, we can't have any cookies in the house because cookies are trouble for me and they're bad, your child will no doubt develop a
They'll
sense
pick
of
up
that.
on that.
Or they kind of swing to the opposite where when you're not around, they're going to overindulge, right? And so the way that we talk about food, the way that we interact and communicate about that and about our own bodies and what food means to us is really important. And I think when we're working, as parents to try and give our kids these ways of experiencing and exploring, that it has to be safe to explore, right? Kids are naturally going to not like some things. They're going to want to,
Yeah.
they're going to be picky, and peanut butter is going to be fine one day and not the next. And, that's all normal. And we also have to give them permission to explore, right? And to be able to have experiences that are moderated with different foods.
Right, yeah.
And I'm not sitting here saying go give your 5-year-old a cup of coffee.
No.
But it's the ability to say, hey, we can do this. We can do this in a healthy way. It doesn't have to be taboo. We don't have to hide it. We can enjoy it because food is meant to be enjoyed.
Yeah.
Right?
Of course. Can you give any examples of like how we kind of set up that conversation around our kids? Like when we're talking about food in our own bodies, like the types of things we should or shouldn't say?
I think it's really important to leave our own assessments of our own physical bodies out of the conversation, right? So if I maybe am super focused on my physical appearance and an idea of perfect, that I can't eat this because it will make me fat, to really be conscious of how we're talking about that in front of kids, or even if we have those kinds of conversations in front of kids, because they do pick up on it.
Yeah.
I've seen 6-year-olds who are making comments about if they're fat or not, which is really sad because that's, not a 6-year-old worry, right? At least it's my hope that that's not any 6-year-old's worry. But I think being able to talk about food is like something that can be exciting, that can be fun, that is enjoyable. And our taste buds change all the time. You might not like something now, but in a couple of weeks when our taste buds change, you might like it. So always continuing to foster hope and
that curiosity.
Yeah, exactly. You took the word right out of my mind. To be able to try new things, right? Because if we get really stuck in a rigid way of thinking, if you think about it, food is one of the only things, maybe not one of the only things, but it is a thing that we can have a lot of control over, right? I can't force you to eat anything you don't want to. You can't force a toddler to eat anything you don't want to. I don't know if there's any parents listening here and they've ever tried to give their kiddo something and, kiddo says no thanks, right? And it can be a tantrum, and that's a child's way of expressing their own autonomy and being able to make decisions for themselves in a world where they are plunked from thing to thing to thing to thing, right? So food can become a way that we control our external world.
Right.
Right? When we feel out of control. This is how eating disorders develop.
It's so tricky. Like as a parent, I'm thinking about my experiences with my stepson. And like, obviously as parents, you just want the best for your kids. Like you want them to be healthy and happy. So we try to limit his sugar, but I'm sure we've, said some questionable things around that and kind of made it seem like it's bad if you have too much. And yeah, it's hard to kind of have that balance of, and instilling healthy behaviors, but also not framing it in an emotional way, if that makes sense.
And I think it can be important to help kids understand the idea of balance in terms of, okay, so you want to have the chocolate bar. Okay, well, can you maybe have a fruit too, or some veggies? Can you have a cup of water with that? If you want to have the chocolate bar, can we then go have some time where we're active?
Yeah.
Right? And so then it starts to frame it as not as bad because, we all know the impact sugar can have on our little people, and it can really change their overall experience.
Oh,
and
yeah.
There's no doubt about that. It's also helping kids understand that, I don't always have to choose the chocolate bar.
Yeah.
Right? There might be times where my body is saying that maybe I really need an apple. Right? And making sure that kids have options and access to that. So it's not that they can't have the chocolate bar, that they could also have the other things. And of course, there are different circumstances and different experiences and different reasons why you would limit or moderate or, maybe have a little bit more control over that. Makes total sense.
Yeah.
But I think if we are in the situation where we are continually moderating that, then we sort of risk flipping to the other side and it starts to happen in secret.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And I think that that's equally a concern. So, I think that there's a lot of conversations about what does balance look like. Right. And if we're going to do this, what else are we going to do?
Yeah.
Right? Or how are we going to sort of, make it even? Right?
Makes sense. Yeah.
Rather than it being good or bad.
Exactly. How can someone identify if they might have a bit of an unhealthy relationship with food?
I think that when we have an unhealthy relationship with food, we probably know, right? It looks a lot like extremes. I'm going to eat everything. I'm going to eat nothing. Some foods are really bad and these foods are really good and I can only eat these things over here. And when we start to attach our food choices with our assessment of who we are.
Okay.
Right? I'm a bad person because I ate this bad thing.
Yeah.
Right? When we find ourselves scouring the pantry after we say have an emotional conversation or something, and we are looking for something to calm that stress or regulate that stress, and we're looking to something external to be able to do that, such as food, I think those are really good indicators, right? How do I actually feel after I eat something? And for a lot of people that struggle with food, they're not necessarily aware of their feelings because we have to be in some state of disconnect to have the physical experience of undereating or overeating.
Right.
Because it is physically uncomfortable. Right? So we have to in some way be disconnected from ourselves in order to go there.
Yeah, I don't want to turn this into a full-on conversation about eating disorders. But yeah, talking this way, it reminds me, because I experienced one when I was 14, and it's so hard to shift out of those thinking patterns. Thinking that certain foods are bad or, feeling bad about yourself. And I still catch myself with certain things. It's I just have such a hard time. I can't go there because I would think negatively of myself. Yeah.
Yeah. And so often our assessments of ourselves show up in our food choices.
Yeah.
And it can be so damaging. Right. And I think it's really important to acknowledge the role socialization plays in this. Right. The way that bodies are critiqued or criticized or spoken about, the images on social media, the influence AI is having on what ideal is, what standards of beauty are. And as we grow and we develop these ideas of what I should be in comparison to what is out there. And sometimes we don't realize that these assessments are not real.
Totally.
They are arbitrary. And I think that there's also this immediate assumption that skinny or thin is healthy. Yeah. And that's not actually true all the time.
Yeah.
Right? There are different bodies that are capable of different things. And there are people who are quite thin who are quite unwell.
Right.
And there are people who have different bodies that are extraordinarily healthy.
Yeah.
And that there is not one single assessment of what that is. And I think that it is so important to look at how our relationship with food plays into these ideas and what is showing up in our relationship with food, right? And I mean, if we think back to infancy, right? When a baby cries, there are usually a couple of things that happen. Baby gets a diaper change, baby gets cuddled, and baby gets fed. Right? So our ideas of love and comfort are no doubt wrapped up in food.
Right.
And nourishment, right? And food can bring so many of those feelings, those emotions, those experiences of comfort. Same is true if you know anybody who really likes chewing on crunchy things, chips, carrots, whatever it is. That crunch that actually helps us process unreleased anger in our body, the clenching of the jaw.
Wow.
Right?
I'd never heard that.
Yeah.
I love chips. So I didn't know that.
So there's all of these different ways that our bodies are entwined with food and the action of eating, and so much is wrapped up in that. It would be so difficult to try and completely dismiss that.
Of course, yeah. If we know this about ourselves, maybe we have some of these patterns of thinking or, ways of being around food that aren't so healthy. How do we change that? How do we take that step to improve our relationship with food?
I think the first and one of the bravest steps is really starting to be mindful about it and noticing what is happening when we're eating. What are the thoughts we are having? What are the feelings? Are we completely disconnected when we're eating, right? Are we somebody who is on our phones while we're eating? Are we working while we're eating? Are we watching TV while we're eating? Do we actually even have the capacity to be present with food, right? And so mindfulness and being aware of food and what we're doing, how we are experiencing food, I think is really important.
Yeah.
Because we can't, everybody can say, we have so much self-awareness. And as a culture, we probably do have a lot of self-awareness. And then how do we accept what is happening, accept what has happened so that we can actually do something different? And mindfulness can help us shift into acceptance.
Okay.
Right? So we might have had this relationship with food and we can recognize it and we want to do something about it, but we also can't change what has happened. Right? But we can do something different as we go forward.
Yeah.
Right? And that it's not going to be perfect.
So what's the next step? We're working on that mindful approach. Where do we go from there?
I think then we have to work on learning how to be balanced. Right?
Okay.
And I think we have to really do some work, with our thoughts on what is good and bad.
Yeah.
Like, why do we assign a particular
value
to something? And why does it say something about who we are? Right? Like I use the example of myself as eating gummy candy, right? Sure, I love gummy candy, but I don't think eating gummy candy makes me a bad person. I don't think it makes me less worthy. I don't think it makes me unlovable. But if I had those thoughts, why?
Right.
Right? And so being able to start to see what are our thoughts, what are our actions, what are our behaviors with food? Am I somebody who's eating, I don't want to eat in front of anybody else because I'm worried about what people will think? Where does that come from?
Right.
Right? So being able to start to shift into changing our narrative around food.
You said this earlier when it comes to kids, and I really like this idea. I've kind of heard it, with a few other areas of mental health, but just this idea of approaching it with curiosity, because I think that kind of takes like the judgment or morality, as you said, out of it. Mm-hmm. It's just approaching things with that curious mind and asking those questions. Mm-hmm. I think it's really productive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I do personally have the belief that, curiosity forces us to suspend judgment, right? It's really hard to have both of those things at the same time. And so when we can be curious about, and especially with kids, well, what did you love about that pizza? What was so good about it? That helps us build an understanding in our own self-awareness.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we can ask ourselves that too. Yeah.
Absolutely. But it also helps kids to start to be able to articulate what is happening for them, why they like something, why they don't. And we might just be having a conversation about food, but let's not pretend that conversation doesn't open the door to 100 other conversations that are going to be important when they grow.
Right.
Right. And if we can ask kids, well, what is it that you love about this? Or what didn't you like about the broccoli? Right. It also gives them permission to be open.
Yeah. Yeah.
To actually express what is happening for them and why. And it signals to kids, hey, your thoughts and feelings matter to me. Right. Okay. So you don't like broccoli today? Okay, cool. You tried it? Awesome. We'll try it again in a few weeks.
Yeah. Love that. So, yeah, I said in the beginning, like food, it's just, it permeates, every aspect of our life. And a lot of that is very social. Like you have a party, there's a cake, like you have people over, you're going to order dinner. So let's talk about that and how food is really intertwined with, our relationships, our family, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think that food is kind of a pivotal part of connection, right? You look at so many cultures and their traditions and their experiences with food and how different that is in maybe collectivist cultures versus individualistic cultures. And, the importance of sharing food together and building that sense of community, right? And so I think that it's really important to think about this. And, you've ever been to somebody's home and there's, maybe a gathering or a party or something is happening. People convene in the kitchen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It's almost inevitable is where people hang out. Like there's all the soft seating in the living room, but we're all going to stand around the kitchen counter because this is where all the snacks are. That's where the chatter happens. It's where the heart of the party is. Right. And so I think it's really important for us to be able to honor and acknowledge those traditions and to be able to carry them forward. Right. Food, in a way, can break the ice.
Yeah.
On many conversations.
Well, and I can think of so many, like you're saying about connection, I can think of so many memories that I have, like important memories where food like plays a big part. I remember, a time during COVID where my husband taught me and my stepson how to make pierogies from his bubby's recipe, or just going out for a really great dinner with, a couple good friends we often kind of think that I think food, takes a back seat and it's more about those conversations, but it is a really important part of those memories.
Yeah, absolutely. And, sometimes food gives us a way to, channel some of our energy, right? To take the focus off, being so intense. It allows us to do something while we are connecting, right?
Right, yeah.
And I think that can be really important for a lot of people. It really does open the door. Like you think about celebrations and the way that we celebrate and, let's have a nice meal or let's do something special. And there's like this specialness attached to that, right? Or, what do you want for your birthday dinner, right? Like these are important things and it kind of sets the foundation for the event or the experience, right? There's like this looking forward to, this hopefulness of there's, this good thing that's coming.
Yeah.
Right.
And we've talked about a lot of, potentially negative emotions around like unhealthy relationship with food, but there's a lot of joy there as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that it like if you look at cultures that really focus on like have a food focus, right? Like all over food and there's, extended conversations and connections and, how close families are through that.
Yeah.
And, the importance of that connection in that time, right? It's like mealtime in a family. Do you, have the ability to sit down together as a family, even if it's for 10 minutes and connect, right? And some families do and some families don't. And it's not about judgment. It's about what each family has available to them. And I think that it's, when we can find those times, food is a really good gateway.
Yeah, like you said, it kind of breaks the ice almost. Yeah. Getting into maybe like some specifics, are you aware of any like specific foods that are particularly beneficial for mental health?
I would say kind of yes. I definitely think, our veggies and fruits are really important because they contain all of our B vitamins, right? But veggies and fruits also need those healthy fats to be able to absorb, right? And so like the fat soluble vitamins, right? Anything that is going to be high in all the B's is going to support your mental health overall.
Okay.
The healthy fats, like the omegas, those are often found in, our nuts and seeds, in fish, in those kinds of foods. Our protein is still really important. Like, yeah, and like those healthy sort of options as much as we can, right? Recognizing the limitations and the cost of food and the worries and the very real worries of food insecurity and access to those, the more opportunities we have to have those, even if it's like frozen veggies, right?
Totally. Yeah.
If you aren't in a situation where you can access fresh vegetables or fresh fruits, frozen, right? Dried, all like it's still got nutritional value. Right. And so the opportunities where we can make things at home and we can be able to maximize that nutrition value.
Yeah.
I think is important.
And on the flip side, are there any foods that you think can exacerbate aspects of our mental health? Like I'm thinking anxiety. Like I know for myself, if I'm feeling particularly anxious, I know to kind of steer clear of caffeine because that'll make me so much more jittery. Like, are there any other things that you can think of that might negatively impact how we're feeling?
Yeah, I mean, caffeine can absolutely be one of them. I think that it's important to notice like what foods might create inflammation in the body because inflammation can really have an impact on our overall well-being. So like if our system is dealing with trying to fight that, then it doesn't have the capacity to function optimally. Sugar, like there's so much research on how sugar impacts the body and our systems and also creates inflammation and what it does to our gut health too. And, so much of our hormone production is made in our guts.
Yeah.
And so it's really important to take care of that. So there are lots of things, but again, I think it comes back to like steering clear of this assessment of good and bad and like really the dose.
Yeah, that
right?
balance.
So, coming back to my old faithful gummy candy, right? I'm going to eat the gummy candy and I'm probably not going to stop myself from eating the gummy candy, but where do I balance that?
Right.
Right. What am I going to, also do or maybe do to support that, right? If I know I'm going to have like this influx of sugar, how am I going to manage that in my body?
Yeah.
Right.
Stephanie, is there anything else, like any last thing you want to leave our listeners with on the idea of food and mental health? And yeah.
Yeah, I think that I really hope that people can take away this idea of, food isn't moral, right? It's not a moral choice. Like it says nothing about you, right?
Yeah.
The idea that what we eat is who we are. And I think that we can work on separating those things. And, we all have different experiences and different access to different things. And we can do the best we can with what we have. And that's okay. And that's enough. And that we don't have to, be so critical and judgmental of ourselves based on what we eat. It's a learning process for a lot of people. So there's a lot of people going through this struggle with food.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I've learned so much today.
You're so welcome. I'm glad to be here.
You've been listening to Living Fully, a Calgary Counseling Center podcast. Thank you for tuning in. This episode was produced by Nick Here, Louisa Campos, Jenna Forbes, and by me, Catherine Hertig. A special thanks to Stephanie Warner. To stay up to date on our latest episodes, be sure to subscribe. We're available in your favorite podcast app. Living Fully is a production of Calgary Counseling Centre and recorded in Calgary on Treaty 7 territory. Living Fully podcast is not a substitute or alternative for professional care or treatment. Calgary Counseling Centre and Counseling Alberta provide effective counseling for anyone in Alberta with no waitlist and no financial barriers. Find us online at calgarycounseling.com or counselingalberta.com. For help across Canada and the United States, call 211. If you are outside of Canada and the US, seek help from your general medical practitioner.